Okay, good morning. My name is Inga Houston, and I'm President and CEO of the Dublin Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our educational seminar. More people in. Welcome to our educational seminar with Stanford Healthcare Tri-Valley. We're very excited to present wellness and mental health in the workplace. First, I would like to thank Stanford Healthcare Tri-Valley for their support of my partners in chambering, the Danville Chamber of Commerce, the Livermore Chamber of Commerce, the Pleasanton Chamber of Commerce, and the San Ramon Chamber of Commerce. And most of them should be here on our program. The 2023 educational series has included programs about the expansion in the Tri-Valley community, which was hosted by Pleasanton Chamber, and stroke and neuroscience services hosted by the San Ramon Chamber, and mindful eating hosted by the Livermore Chamber. All programs can be found on their respective YouTube channel for each chamber. And finally, the Danville Chamber will close out the year by hosting a program soon, but I don't know what that program is. And I don't think we'll check in with Shelby because she said she was going to be a little late to this and see if she knows. First off, a little housekeeping. If you have any questions, raise your hand or put a note in the chat function. And please remember to mute yourself when not asking a question. Today's program is on a topic that sometimes is not talked about. Some emotions can be very powerful, and they can affect a person's productivity in a positive or a negative way, as well as a person's well-being at work and beyond. Today, we will learn strategies to stay well and maintain our mental health state in, goodness, why did I change things? Our mental state in the workplace. And I'm sure these tips can be applied to all areas of life. I sincerely hope that you can take a nugget or two home to gain coping strategies to be the best you can be at work and at home. So let's talk about our speaker today. Miss Winter Brown is today's speaker, and she returns to the Dublin Chamber to address wellness and mental health in the workplace. Miss Brown is a certified yoga therapist who has been teaching since 2009. She holds a doctorate from Duke University in poli-sci. Winter is a teacher of teachers and is the trainer at Dragonfly Yoga and Wellness. And she runs the 300-hour teacher training program. And she also founded Dragonfly's prenatal yoga teacher training. Winter combines movement, breath, and mindfulness to empower the healer within you. And a little personal note, she loves to hike in the mountains with her dog Tootsie. So please welcome back Miss Winter Brown.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm very excited to be here. I saw one question in the meeting chat, which is really great. And so I'm already thinking about how we can start to address that. If there are any other questions as we go forward, by all means, you can raise your hand. You can pop them in the chat. If you want to share kind of where you're working, sometimes that also helps me get a sense of kind of where everyone's coming from, but totally up to you. I thought that we'd start by kind of going through just a little presentation I developed, and then from there moving into Q&A and hopefully some real good conversation around how we can support our employees, support ourselves with wellness and mental health. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I will say I developed this with my leader. Originally, we were going to collaborate in this. So, all right, it looks like we are now sharing screens. All right, everybody can see that? Excellent. It looks like I lost my arrow function again. So when we get to the end, I need to closing out my my share. Okay, so wellness and mental health in the workplace. What we thought we'd cover today, and I'm using the plural we because again I have my my collaborator in my as I go through this, is really looking at work wellness in the workplace, what it is and why it matters. We kind of developed what we call the wellness pie. So these four main components that we might think about that we can try to encourage for ourselves and for our employees in the workspace. Some potential next steps. How do we actually begin to implement some of the things that might be suggested here? And then some good time for questions and group conversation. That's on the docket. I really enjoy this definition of wellness from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services. They say, wellness is about how we live our lives and the joy and fulfillment and health we experience. And what I really appreciate about this particular definition is that it's very expansive. It's very inclusive. Sometimes we think about wellness and we really focus on our physical well-being. There's been a lot more conversation about our mental health and our mental well-being, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic. But this is even more expansive than that, right? It's how well are we living our lives? How much joy are we experiencing in our lives? How fulfilled do we feel in our lives? And those are all contributing factors to our sense of wellness. And with the workplace being a dominant place that we spend our life, right? The average person is going to spend about a third of their entire life at work. What we experience in the workplace can really impact our personal lives, our personal wellness, as well as our professional lives and our professional wellness. And so finding ways to really support employee wellness, support your wellness, right, as an employer can be really important. And then it also matters for the bottom line, right? There's kind of like the communal or the individual and personal aspect of why we might want to support one another in the workplace, but it really does matter for our business as well. We know that replacing employees is costly, right? That as of May of 2023, a Gallup poll shows that 37% of employees intend to look for a new job in the next year. And the cost to replace them is 1.5 to 2 times the cost of their salary. Right? That's just to replace them, onboard them, hire them, all of that stuff. When we recognize our employees and the work that they do, it translates into commitment. So there may be some very simple things we can do as employers to help our employees feel more recognized, to boost their commitment to our business and our workplace, and to feel more engaged, which is going to help kind of hopefully offset that need to potentially go to a different work site or workplace. When employees are struggling, it affects business performance and revenue, right? So businesses in the US have estimated to lose approximately $20 million in lost opportunity per 10,000 employees who are struggling or suffering. And that can be because of suboptimal or poor employee performance, which might affect customer service and customer delivery, higher employer turnover, increased sick days, and things like that. And then wellness goes hand in hand with a missing part of my screen. But you can read that last bullet. So there's some really good reasons, financial reasons, as to why we might look at increasing support for our employees and ourselves in the workplace. This little wellness pie, Joe, my director, and I developed, it's meant to kind of ask this question: am I caring for my employees so that they can care for themselves? And part of this is that we often do think, especially here in the US, of wellness as this very individual concern. But where we work and who we work with really does matter, right? Because again, we're spending a third of our life total at our workplace or workplaces, depending upon kind of what we're doing. And so we broke down, as we were kind of talking about what might this look like, how we might support this for your business. We kind of broke down employee wellness into 4 key components that we'll talk about. One is resilience, employee resilience, connection, engagement, and then the physical environment. We'll dive in. to resilience. Resilience is our ability to persevere and even grow from challenging situations like trauma, tragedy, threats, or significantly stressful situations. The really wonderful thing about resilience is that it is adaptable and it can grow, right? So resilience is something that we can actively strengthen. It's not that, right, you weren't born with a certain amount of resilience and that's all you're going to have for the rest of your life. And in fact, our resilience might even kind of shift day to day or over periods of time, just in what it is exactly that we're going through, right? So if we have a lot of stress for a long period of time, our resilience might be pretty low, right? If we experience little bursts of stress and followed by some amounts of kind of recuperation and downtime, then our resilience might begin to grow a little bit, right? So it's not a static thing, it's adaptable, and it's something that we can strengthen. And even better, it's something that we can support with one another. So the APA identifies 4 components for increasing resilience. One is connection, which we get to talk about in just a minute. So how are we developing and affirming a strong sense of support among colleagues and leadership, right? So when you think about this in the workplace, how do your employees interact with each other, right? Is there a sense of team and team building and team efforts if there's enough grouping for teams, right? Or does it kind of feel like every person feels a little bit more isolated? Or maybe there's 1 or 2 people who might feel more isolated. What is their relationship to you, right? Do they feel like you're a person who they can come to for support? An element of resilience is wellness. What I thought was really interesting as I was kind of diving in is that we actually have a life cycle for our focus, our energy, and our mental clarity. And that's roughly 90 minutes to 120 minutes. So every hour and a half, every 2 hours, our brains and our bodies need a break. And so that might be something to kind of keep in the back of your mind, right? Do you have an opportunity for just a little bit of a break every 90 minutes, every 2 hours, right? Something that helps them shift the focus or recalibrate and reset in order to maybe stand up and move around or breathe some fresh air, whatever, whatever that is for your work environment. So I'd encourage you to really kind of start to create opportunities if they're not already there and really support them in kind of maintaining and finding that life work balance that's going to help us stay and retain our focus. Healthy thinking is another element of resilience, and self-compassion is a key element of our mental thinking and our mental health. And this is actually something that you can encourage in your employees and you can encourage for yourself, right? We can role model self-compassion. We could, especially like during times that are feeling challenged and stressed, right? So what kind of things do you say to yourself? What kinds of things are you reflecting back to your employees when they're feeling stressed or there's a challenge that's happening at work? Is there a way that you can, maybe with that kind of growth mindset, right? Where mistakes, as tricky as they are opportunities for learning and opportunities for growth, right? Create a little bit of self-compassion in the midst of also striving to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And then finally, meaning, right? And so finding ways to encourage your employees to renew their sense of purpose and their meaning within their work. There might be some employees they don't find or they don't really locate significant amount of meaning in their work, and that's okay, right? So the question is, where do they locate meaning and purpose for themselves? Is there a way that you can also support them in achieving that? So again, there's a balance between what they're doing and how it's getting reflected in the workplace. So we find that when we kind of spend some time and we spend some effort on creating a resilient workforce, we actually see a really significant return, right? For every dollar spent, there's a return of approximately $2.30. And we see that mostly through lower healthcare costs, higher productivity, decreased turnover, lower absenteeism. So finding ways to help your employees renew their commitment to their work, increase their sense of control within challenges as much as is possible, and leverage those challenges as opportunities for personal and professional growth might help build resilience. The interesting thing about stress is we tend to associate it sometimes with negativity, for lack of a better word, right? Stress in itself can be really productive. Lots of things that we might find joy in and fulfillment in and purpose in might be considered stressful, right? Planning vacations, planning big events, buying a house, learning something new, right? Those are all things that can be stressful. And there's a difference between eustress, which is productive stress, which is again like maybe little bits of stress where we experience a little bit, but then it tapers off. It's not as chronic. Build our resilience, gives us kind of a little bit of energy, versus that chronic stress that endures for too long, which can be very hard on us, both mentally and physically challenging for us. So any way that we can help our employees and help ourselves manage chronic stress and maybe seek out that eustress will also help benefit and promote resilience. The next thing we wanted to talk about is connection. So humans are really wired to connect with each other. In fact, when we look at our nervous system, sometimes you hear people talking about a stress response system where there's fight, flight, and fleeing, right? What do we do when we feel stressed? We might have these kind of instinctual, unconscious things that we do in response. Prior to that, we look around, and it's often unconscious, right? But we look around at the people around us and we think we have support. We're looking for support. How connected do I feel at this moment? And we're going to read that in a lot of ways. And again, it happens outside of our awareness, right? But we're reading it by people's tones of voices, the looks on our faces, right? Does this person look like, are they greeting me with a smile? Or are they also looking stressed? Is there something I need to be aware of that's happening? Oh dear, I was trying to find the chat and instead the slide. All right, I'm afraid I can't finish the chat, so I'm gonna answer things in the chat when we come out of the slide. Sorry. So connection is really key for how we handle our stress, right? And that's partly why our colleagues at work and our employers at work are really important to us, right? So when you're at work, as much as it's possible, because again, we're all human, right? Like we've got our own things happening, we've got our own challenges and our own stress that are going to affect this. I'd encourage you to be mindful of your facial expressions, the tone of voice that you have, your body language as you're interacting with employees, especially in those intense or stressful or challenging situations. If we can role model, and even perhaps experience for yourself, oh, I'm feeling really stressed. I'm going to take a breath right now. I'm going to talk compassionately to myself. I'm going to talk compassionately with you. Then the whole dynamic of the environment starts to shift a little bit. And we can stay a little more in that wired up for connection thing. Once we shift into a stress response, our rational brain does not think as well, right? We can't problem solve. We're not as creative. And so we really want to try to stay in that part that feels like it can problem solve and it can react creatively and connectively to a challenge. Another way that you might do this is to engage in active listening, right? So really hearing what your employees are saying, even if we don't have to necessarily have a solution to the problem, or we don't have to have the answer to the question. The fact of your presence, a compassionate presence that's actively listening, can be very soothing for a person, very stabilizing, right? And in that, we might even ask what and how questions. Oh, what's happening here? How is that happening for you, right? How is that showing up for you? When we ask why questions, like why is that happening? There's a part of ourselves that can get really defensive. So what and how are perhaps going to be questions that we can ask that keep the person in, again, that problem solving, kind of exploring, figuring out mode versus the why question, which might make them feel like, oh, I'm on the spot, I'm in trouble, I've got to respond, right? This feels like conflict. I'm going to move into fight and flight. Right? And if you do have a challenge that's occurring in the workplace, see if you can try to offer support throughout the challenge, right? Maybe beforehand. Oh, hey, we've got this really big deadline coming up. Here are some things we can do to mitigate it. Or what do you think we can do to kind of respond to this big challenge? During the challenge, right? What are we offering in ways of support? Can we offer still a 90-minute breaks, even if it's just for a moment, right? To kind of reset and breathe. Can we offer a little bit of a balance to what might feel like a really intense time period? And then afterwards to help your employees mend. And this might include debriefing after challenging situations in the workplace. What went well, right? Where are some places we could have grown, right? Where learning might have happened. What didn't go well, right? What didn't feel supportive? But starting off kind of figuring that out. And then we get more information about ourselves and our employees about what best supports us when we're in a challenging situation that we can then apply moving forward. The next place is our environment. And there's many components to our environment. So we might look at our physical environment, the space and the equipment that's available to us, and the settings and the conditions that we operate in. So our physical environment consists of basically everything that's kind of around us, right? The temperature of the space. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? The lighting in the space, the sounds around us. I had mentioned earlier that there's a part of ourselves that's always outside of our awareness. It's kind of scanning, right? Like, am I safe in this moment? Our physical environment is a big part of what our nervous system is scanning to see whether or not we're safe. And so, talking with your employees about how they feel in the physical environment might be really helpful. This might also include things like ergonomics, right? How is their physical environment set up? Are they putting themselves at risk for a workplace injury due to repetitive motions or repetitive straining of their system, right? Maybe the desk is too low, or that there's a lot of bending that happens, and there's maybe some support that's kind of needed around them. This might also include whether your employees have the physical ability to do the job they're hired for, right? And so sometimes pre-screening around that, there's pre-employment physicals that can happen, some really gentle questioning around people's tolerances, some coaching around how to lift, ergonomics of work posture, both bending and lifting, that might be all a part of that physical environment. With space and equipment, do we have the proper tools in the room to do our jobs, right? It can be pretty stressful and hard to meet deadlines if we don't have all the tools we need at hand. And I recognize that can be complicated, right? Sometimes it takes time to get the resources. It takes money to get the resources. But having those conversations with your employees, if there is a delay or there's a reason why not, might be really helpful, just to have them help get a sense of what's happening and why, right? So a little more increased transparency. And then the settings that we operate. And this is kind of more about kind of, again, those pieces that we've mentioned already, the connection and what we'll get to with the engagement, right? Who am I working with? Who's populating the workspace that I am in? My colleagues, my leadership. If I'm working with the public, what's my experience with the public like, right? And with this, we might also think about, and this kind of slides in a little bit with the engagement, but how are my employees feeling validated and recognized in the work, right? And if they do have a particularly intense element of their job, some part where maybe they're experiencing a lot of friction or some challenge, is there something that I'm doing that also helps balance that out? And so, so what you might do, right, around this kind of thing is just, again, have conversations with your employees. What are the ways that they feel really connected or supported? And for everybody, that might feel like a little bit different, right? Or what wellness might look like in the workplace for them might feel a little bit different. Um, so is it about having really protected breaks that every 15 minutes there is an opportunity, or I don't forget what the law is, I apologize, but you have the opportunity for a break or you have an opportunity for lunchtime, right? How do tasks feel? Are they divided pretty evenly? Does one person feel like they have the brunt of responsibility or the brunt of tasks and other people are feeling underutilized? Um, are people working up to, but not too far over or too far under their abilities, right? Are they working in the way that they want to work? And that's kind of, when I say that, I'm kind of trying to connect it back to meaning, right? If a person doesn't derive a lot of personal meaning from their work, um, then what they might want in response in terms of recognition or in terms of support at work might be very different from somebody who derives or gets a lot of meaning from their work and feels like personally fueled by having a purposeful job. And so even understanding kind of those individual elements of that environment can be really helpful, because those two colleagues might also interact with each other, right? And create a dynamic that feels like it's either supportive or unsupportive for the colleague. And then finally, we're going to move into the fourth slice of engagement, which we've kind of been hitting at, right? That having engaged employees leads to more retained employees. And that in general, we work harder and better with the people that we know, right? So feeling that sense of connection with the people that we're working with in a way that maybe, again, feels right for us. So for some folks, that might be feeling like, oh, my workplace colleagues, they're like my second family. And for another person, that might be like, oh, I just really enjoy being able to kind of go in. I've got some colleagues I get to talk to, and I'm going to go back home, right? But to have that sense of connection and that sense of engagement with the people that they're working with. And this is where those things like recognition can become really important. Understanding how a person gets meaning and purpose, if they find it in their job, what that looks like, right? And then we might even look at like what temperature gauges what's happening, right? So that's if there's something happening, right? How are individuals experiencing it? How is the overall workplace experiencing it? Does it feel like it's things are kind of too hot, too tricky? Everyone's a little bit burned out, feeling challenged. Does it feel like it's a little bit too cool, right? Maybe there's some stagnation. Is it just right? And again, I recognize a lot of these factors might be out of your control, right? But keeping a sense of like how your employees are experiencing the workplace can be really helpful. And again, providing support for them when they need it. This might also include, right, the engagement that you have with your employees. Um, how do you handle, right, or interact with questions, right? Do you prefer to have kind of do you want a lot of engagement or curiosity or pushback around policies? Do you prefer that it doesn't happen? Right? You've got your own sense for how you like to manage in your employees or in your workplace, right? And sometimes being very clear about that can be helpful as well. Is there psychological safety for your employees? And with psychological safety, we're really looking at, does your employee feel like they can come and talk to you? And not be penalized for telling you something that perhaps you might not like to hear, right? That can feel pretty uncomfortable. So what's happening? What's your relationship with your employees? And then what are your employees' relationships with each other? And again, knowing that we can't control everything, but maybe there are some things that we can support. So if a mental health issue does arise for one of your employees or for yourself, do know that your conversations and your support for that employee can make an incredible difference, right? Especially if we're thinking about um, if a person feels supported and connected and engaged in their work, even as they're having a really hard time, they will probably more likely stay at the workplace, right? Than if they're having a lot of stress and they're not feeling that, they might just check out. And that might appear like just not showing up for work, right? It might be a lot of sick days. Um, and so having some honest conversations with your employees can be helpful. And there are some strategies that you can do as you start to see some maybe there's some mental health and issues that are coming up for you or for one of your employees. Um, One is to prepare yourself, right? And part of that might be a self-evaluation around whether you have some biases around mental health issues. Maybe there are some that you have some for and others that you don't. Things that you're some issues that maybe you're very comfortable talking about and supporting, other issues that you're not. And this isn't to say that you need to be supportive of all issues. It's to know yourself so that if you have an employee who does have a specific issue that you're not comfortable talking with, you know that going into it, and you can direct them into those areas or to people who do feel more comfortable with that, right? So that when you're having these conversations with your employees, you're coming into it as stable and as centered as you can, right? Because again, if we're kind of wired to connect with one another, and I'm part of my safety is assessing how safe you are for me. If I see that you're really stressed and you're not capable to really handle a difficult conversation, I'm not going to have that conversation with you, right? Most likely. Um, I will choose to opt out, most likely. And maybe, I'll speak from my own experience. That's me, right? Your employees might choose differently. But again, that's that element of psychological safety and the way in which you can show up for your employee. You might educate yourself about some common mental health issues. And also just know that there just might be some issues you don't have any experience with, right? And that's okay. And it's about knowing kind of who you are and what you can offer. And in that, being an empathetic, constructive listener. And it's important to know, like, you're not a mental health professional, right? There's people who go and get training and a lot of education in this that can be great resources. So it's not your job to fix or cure your employees. The question is, how can you offer a compassionate and supportive element to what's happening? And if need be, advocate for them to have the resources and the interventions and the things that they might need in order to cope with what is happening, right? Um, Another thing that you might utilize is knowing what you don't knowing what not to do, right? And so if your employee doesn't wish to talk about their issue, don't force them to do that. Try not to make empty promises. Um, don't prescribe what to do, right? And as much as possible, avoid what we might call toxic positivity. Oh, everything's going to be okay. It's all right, right? You just got to look on the bright side of things. This can feel very dismissive of the challenge the person is experiencing and also be kind of harmful, right, to the employee who's going through that challenge and may not be experiencing in that way. So finding ways to validate and support our employees, right? And again, help them find the resources they need with people who are trained for that. There are some warning signs for mental health issues that you can kind of be on the lookout, right? And so some of this might be a sudden decline in your performance. So you have a rock star employee, they're really terrific. And then all of a sudden, they're not rocking as much anymore, right? Maybe they're coming in late, or maybe they're coming in and the energy that they used to have just isn't there. They can't concentrate, or they're not as focused as they used to be. they might start to experience new or worsening absenteeism or tardiness, right? A change in attitude or relationships. Maybe they got along really well with all of the colleagues and now everybody is just setting them off, right? Or this one particular person just setting them off. They might, there might be a change in their experience or the experience, sorry, their appearance, right? Maybe they're not caring for themselves the way that they used to. There might be increased conflict at work. So if you see those kind of happening with your employees, those might just be little moments to be like, oh, I think I need to check in with them. Do I feel comfortable checking in with them? What am I going to do when I check in with them? And this gets us to the next one, right? When you have the conversation, sometimes it's helpful to have scripts kind of available, but just like talking points, right? Or like the elevator speech, right? That you have available to kind of offer your employees. And if you are talking with your employees and inviting them to have what might be a very hard conversation, allowing them some privacy and confidentiality, right? So are you having this conversation in a space that feels pretty private and secure? Are you having the conversation in front of their colleagues or in front of like the public, right? Depending upon what your workplace is. And you want to do it at a time that's pretty low conflict, right? So not while you're addressing, oh, you've been late 5 times in a row. What's going on? Right? Because again, that might make them feel more defensive. It's going to be harder for them to potentially open up and talk about this thing that might be really challenging for them. So you could try some different scripts. You could say something like, I don't know what to say about your recent loss. I really wish there was something I could do to fix it. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I care. And that I really hope we can find a way to support you. Right? Because there are some things we just don't have words for. Right? And it's okay to say, I don't know what to say. It just sounds really hard. I'm here, right? What can we do to support you? Is there anything specific we can do at work to help you through this time, right? Maybe they need a little more flexibility in their schedule. Maybe they need a little more time off, right? What's going to help them at this moment? You could say something like, I noticed you seem really unhappy lately. Is there anything happening? Can we talk about how I can help? Right? And even that phrasing, can we talk about how I can help, gives your employee a lot of choice about whether and how much they want to share with you, right? They could say like, oh, I am unhappy. What would help? And then it helps, right? What would help me right now? What's something specific that would help me right now? And maybe they'll share what is going on and maybe they won't, but you're asking questions, what will help, right? Another thing might be like, oh, we've got some resources available to help you. Here they are. And you could hand them, right? If your insurance covers uh, family leave, right? Like knowing kind of like California law around family leave, how to have those forms available to get there, having any resources available, telephone numbers, online sites for any of the kind of like wellness programs and mental health programs that either your work site covers or your insurance covers, having those readily available and easy to get to will also help out, right? So that it's not, again, we're giving them opportunities to kind of name and find the support that they might need. And at the same time, eliminating obstacles to receiving it, right? For somebody who's feeling like they're going through a hard time, scrolling through the health insurance to find this particular number to get to this particular person, it's going to be additional work that they may not have the mental, the physical, the emotional capacity to do, right? So if you can take that burden off of them, you'll likely increase the possibility that they're going to reach out and get help from somebody who's trained to help them. Because we want to eliminate those burdens, right? We want to make it as easy as possible for our employees to get help, so that they can be supported in difficult times, right? And retain their sense of commitment and engagement and connection with you, so that this challenging time doesn't lead to, I just can't make it work, I'm going to say goodbye. I really love this job, but I just can't make it work, I'm going to go, right? That's what we want to avoid. So having resources available for them can be really helpful, especially in those times around the conversation, right? Or if you think that maybe your employee or your employees might need help but don't want to talk about it, that information more public, right? In an employee workspace, putting that information up so anybody at any point can reach it and connect with it very easily without,
You're on
yeah.
mute.
I'm on mute.
I can't hear you. Can anybody else?
No.
I can hear you.
I can. You can hear me?
Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I can hear as well.
I can hear.
Yes,
Oh man.
I can hear her.
Huh.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, are we back?
Yes.
Okay. I wonder if I'm wearing AirPods. I wonder if they did something with their connection and some microphones switched or something. Once again, with the screen share, I'm apparently helpless. All right, I got one last screen, and then we'll pop off into our group space, which will feel nice. So one last screen, assuming. There we go. Next steps. So you might want to reach out and find some support, right, for yourself and for your employees. And in this, know that your employees are great resources, right? So you might start with an inventory. What are you doing currently? What works really well and fits really well with your values and your mission as a workplace, right? What's already at hand? And then you might talk to your employees. Is there anything that's missing? Anything that would feel really supportive that you could add in? And maybe the answer is, oh, I can't add that in right now. And that's, then we have that conversation with our employees. Maybe there's something else that can happen instead. And then there are a ton of assistance or a ton of resources that are offering these kinds of support services for companies. There are wellness coaches, medical professionals, EAP companies, right? Whatever you think might best kind of fill out and support you and your employees and your mental and physical and emotional health and wellness. One small plug for Stanford, we do have an occupational health services that can help with some of this should you wish for any support from our end, and with a number there to kind of reach out. All right, I think I'm all done. You're like helping me stop scriptures. I can't find my mouse. Oh, thank you very much. We're gonna skip the last slide, which has my all right, now I just need to find you. Nope. Where am I? There we go. Okay. Found
Hello,
you.
everybody. We're on a gallery. We did have a couple of questions. Kim Van Lair, I think she's with Livermore School District, perhaps. She asked, how can we encourage wellness amongst our students, families, and teachers and staff at schools?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question. And kudos to you for thinking of so many people in your community that you're really trying to support this for. So a couple of ideas I have, right? One would be to kind of start a little bit small and look at your staff and your employees and just see, what do we have available right now? How much access do they have to that? Right. And then you can even do a survey among your employees when you start thinking about expanding it to students and families. What are some needs there? What's going really well? Maybe what needs some support? Are there some needs that are unmet? How can we begin to help encourage that? There are a lot of different programs available for schools to bring in wellness for both teachers and students that can also kind of trickle out to families So you could look into some of those, just depending upon what you're looking for. But I would start probably with your staff and your teachers. They probably have a good sense of what they might be needing and what their students and their families might be needing. And I'll make sure that I send a copy of the slide deck over to Inga. Yeah.
Awesome. And sorry, Kim, she's with Dublin Unified. So about that. Okay, any other questions? Anybody want to ask anything? It was pretty informative, Miss Winter Brown. Thank you very much. What, you're laughing at me?
No, I just appreciate that you found it informative. I don't know.
I did
Sorry,
actually.
I laugh when I'm happy. So yeah.
It was informative, and I learned a couple of things that under resilience, the wellness part for the focus, energy, mental clarity, and it cycles. And when I pay attention to people, I kind of watch people in my office. It's like every so often they just get up and walk and then go back to their desk, and I'm seeing that now as a cycle for wellness, and I should probably start. And then the other thing that I learned was encouraging resiliency in your workforce equals a bottom line dollar amount that's can be very important for employers to take into consideration as they work with their workforce. Because we all have limited resources. So anyway, any last questions? Today's program will be available on the Dublin Chamber's YouTube channel. I'll also share it with the other chambers so they can push it out to their members. And if you want, so you can always refer back to what you learned today or share it with your family and friends. It'll take a couple of days to prepare the recording and get it uploaded. And then hopefully we'll get the slide deck and I'll share that with everybody. Judy, do you have a plan yet for the final education program?
Yes, we have a plan and it's coming together now. We're actually going to be working with Rick Shelby, who is my chair on a program. And it's likely to be a program that's going to set in motion what we're doing on our Health and Wellness Day on the town green. So excited about that, and we'll have a date certain very soon in September.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that will round out this year's educational programs. Oh, James has a comment.
I think James is on mute.
Maybe his microphone's not working. Oh, no microphone. Bummer.
Do you want to type it in the
You can
chat?
type it.
In the meantime, while James is typing away, watch for announcements for Judy's session in Danville. We want to thank Stanford Healthcare Tri-Valley for their partnership and supporting the 5 chambers in the Tri-Valley and the greater Tri-Valley. So, oh, here we go. Do you have any infographics on the cost of mental health that we can share with our businesses? That's a good.
Yeah, it's a great question. I unfortunately do not have any infographics on the cost of mental health. Let me think about where there might be a place for that.
Sure, there's a study somewhere. It's just finding it.
Yeah, there are a lot of studies. Gallup poll does a lot in this too. And then, yeah, trying to think if there's like a particular site. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, might also have some infographics on their website. That might be a place to look.
SAMHSA, SANSA.
SAMS. SHA. I forget my acronyms. If I don't have it in my head, let me pull up my my
I think
substance abuse. So SAMHSA. Substance abuse and
I
mental
think
health
Three
services.
Valleys Community Foundation may have some data that might be helpful. I will check on that for you, James, and check on that for the group because they are focused on mental health grants this year. And so I do think they might have something. And yes, I agree with you. Anything that's a visual is really helpful.
Yeah, that really is. It's a great
Okay.
question. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and I will send out an email when an e-blast when this is ready.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Winter.
Thank you. It's good
Bye.
to see you again.
It's great seeing you. Thank you.